empowering your thoughtful leaders in your organization is about influencing the most influential people in your organization to drive change and to help a decision get to the fruition or the vision that you had hoped for.
Welcome to the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast, where we help leaders maximize their impact and transform their lives. I'm your host, Nick Nyber, as well as the VP of Strategic Partnership with InitiativeOne. And on today's show, we have Tracy Johnson. Tracy is the Chief Operating Officer for InitiativeOne, and we are continuing the series of the book, Is Everyone on the Boat? And if you are looking for information on the other characters from the book, simply go back into previous episodes and you'll be hearing us talk about what a visionary is. You'll be hearing what a primary leader is. And today what we're going to be talking about is the thoughtful leader. The thoughtful leader. So welcome to the show, Tracy.
Thank you, Nick.
It's great to have you on here. And I'm excited about talking about this specific character because once people understand actually what a thoughtful leader is, it makes sense to learn how organizations operate because this person makes such an impact on an organization, though they may not be that executive for the company.
Yeah.
So let's start with just a simple introduction or a simple definition. What is a thoughtful leader?
Thoughtful leaders are those individuals in organizations who have actually the greatest influence. And oftentimes they can be overlooked by formal leadership. One of the identifiers of that thoughtful leader or the group of thoughtful leaders, and they will make up about 10% of the organization, is that they are, when people really are questioning change or something that's going on in the organization, they will be the individuals that people will go to and ask hard questions and get a sense of whether they're on board or whether they have some resistance to change process. And it's really important to know that because formal leaders oftentimes look to other formal leader positions to drive change and to drive impact in organizations. And they miss this level of leader, and I say level of leader not from a hierarchical perspective, but from an influence perspective. They miss the leaders that actually can make the change process or the decision process go at a much more accelerated rate. And in today's day and age, we have to keep up from a quality perspective, but we also have to really excel from a speed perspective in our organizations. It's not either or, it's both and. And so equipping I'll say not equipping, empowering. I'll say empowering your thoughtful leaders in your organization is about influencing the most influential people in your organization to drive change and to help a decision get to the fruition or the vision that you had hoped for in that.
You had mentioned change. So there's change going on in any and all industries.
Yes.
So if there's change going on in an organization where that change could go two different ways. Mm-hmm. It could get implemented in a healthy manner, or there could be sabotage.
Yes.
So where does a thoughtful leader come in that scenario?
Yeah, because thoughtful leaders are the most trusted leaders in the organization, it really, remember how I said, leaders sometimes will only look to the formal hierarchical structure in the
people that
organization.
have the titles.
Yes, titles, position, those types of things. And what can happen if you ignore or don't include thoughtful leaders in that change process or that decision process, what can happen is undermining or a quiet resistance to the change because they have not been included. And so thoughtful leaders are like we call it the Mikeys of the organization. Fred talked about that this morning. He talked about how in the old Life cereal, for those of you who are not my age, who are actually younger, you may have never heard of this.
I remember Mikey.
So there's a cereal that was Life cereal, and they had these 3 boys sitting in front of bowls of Life cereal. And thoughtful leaders are the Mikeys of the organization. So somebody will say, "You try it," right? One brother says, "You try it." The other brother will say, "You try it." And then they'll look at each other and they'll go, "Let's get Mikey." And that actually happens in organizations. Mm-hmm. That happens because they know that if Mikey gets on board or if he likes it, that all of a sudden everybody likes it. If Mikey likes it, everybody will like it. And so if you don't include or incorporate thoughtful leaders in your change process or in how you're beginning to move toward a new purpose or a new product as a business, you really have missed some deep opportunities to accelerate that change process.
I'm Fred Johnson. I'm the founder and the CEO here at InitiativeOne. We've just ended another think tank that was attended by close to 1,000 people from across the country. And what a great time that we had. I'm sharing that because in our next think tank next month, we want you to be a part of that. We want you to experience the energy, the wisdom that our folks are sharing with each other, and the growth that is taking place in their own lives. We want you to participate in that as well. Next month, one of my most special subjects we're going to be talking about, near and dear to my heart, called the universal law of attraction. And that as you're growing, you will begin to attract people to you who are not only growing, they have grown beyond you and they want you to come with them. We're going to learn about how that happens in our lives, how to be a catalyst for the law of attraction for others, and how that can begin to unleash your impact and your potential as a leader. So join us next month as we talk about leadership and the universal law of attraction and how that can change the destiny of your entire leadership journey. We'll see you next month. Thank you.
So if you're looking to make a change, it can have short-term consequences or long-term positive influences long-term. Because that thoughtful leader was not necessarily that the thoughtful leader like, hey, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Is it more about them being heard?
Thoughtful leaders.
Yeah, where does that fall?
Thoughtful leaders are not in it for them. Oftentimes they're servant leaders to the organization. They are there because they love the organization deeply. And in loving the organization deeply, what's most important to them are the people around them, are the success that the organization lives on for another day, another generation of leaders. And it is not about putting them on a pedestal. In fact, what we find is if we say to somebody, "You are the thoughtful leader of the thoughtful leaders," they will be the first to say, "Do not draw attention to me in that way." Because that is not what motivates them. What motivates them is the community of people around them and that they're safe and that we're able to do this together. They really do bring the organization together at a very servant leadership level.
Giving them a label and they don't want it.
It is true. I've seen it
like
over
they don't
and
want
over.
the title. They don't want.
They don't care about the title.
You had said thoughtful leaders treat or feel part of their organization like a family.
Yes.
And Regina earlier this week, she had talked with me a little bit about the thoughtful leader, and she said this probably 3 or 4 times, and it was don't mess with my family.
Yes.
Like they are like almost it could almost be like a protector. Like I want to see my company succeed.
Yes.
And if this is going to hurt it, I need to step in and say something because I care.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
That is accurate. The one caution I would put to that is thoughtful leaders are not yes people. Thoughtful leaders are thoughtful leaders. In other words, if you are getting hard questions from a thoughtful leader, you have to look at the information and what they're actually getting at. What they're getting at oftentimes is about the safety of the organization, because that's what matters most to them. And what we mean by safety is that ability for individuals that they work with to succeed and win. And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes those thoughtful leaders can ask the hardest questions. And in asking the hardest questions, just like others around you, they're not trying to be difficult. They're not trying to be, you have to be really secure in your own leadership to be able to talk with them at the level that those hard questions really need to be answered at. And so if you've come up with a plan and they're asking some hard questions and you're not willing to relook or reevaluate or adjust, to get that thoughtful leader on board, you really have begun a sabotage process with your decision making, because they will ask hard questions, and they're asking hard questions for good reasons. So you better find out what that information is that they have to implement or change or adjust that plan. And if you don't adjust that plan, it is not that they're going to go against you just because you don't adjust the plan, provided that you do what? Provided that you give them the why you have to go in the direction that you're going, and that you've thought through what they're seeing in the organization. So that's when you think about personal leadership and working with thoughtful leaders, they are not yes people, and you really have to be willing to listen and hear them out, because they really are the influencers across the rest of the organization. Make sense?
Yes. Employees knowing the why can, I think help organizations as a whole.
Yes.
But 20 or 30 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah. You didn't have to answer the why. You could do things by position and title.
They weren't asking for the why.
Right.
Give me my checklist. Do your checklist, and if you don't, this is the discipline.
Yeah. That's no longer, we're no longer able to lead in today's day and age in that way. And the reason for that is people have access to lots of information. And in having access to lots of information via the internet, you really do want to get and gather the best ideas for any and every situation as possible. And the thoughtful leaders they help filter and get the best ideas on the table as quickly as possible.
Correct.
Because of that influence.
A thoughtful leader, like as you're explaining this to me, I'm thinking, as long as there's a healthy culture, because there's like a twinge of like manipulation here. It's having the thoughtful leader bought in, knowing that they influence, 12 to 15 other people in their organization. It's a great lever. However, like there has to be high trust with those primary leaders and as thoughtful leaders, as well as the visionary.
Yeah.
You started agreeing, so you had a thought come up. So share that with me before you answer.
I'm just thinking, people will say this to me all the time, or like we'll go into environments, let's say it's a manufacturing environment, and we'll be asked this question. That comment about manipulation caught my attention, because is it, you have to think about it. Are you really manipulating them, and that's why you have to be so straight with them. You have to shoot straight with them.
Okay.
You're not trying to convince them of what to say, and you need to put that on the table with them.
Right.
You're actually wanting them to use their voice in what they're thinking and what they're knowing about the organization. You're not trying to have them be your mouthpiece. And so sometimes in those environments we'll be asked that question. Well, isn't that just manipulation? Like, how many nights do I have to go out after work for a beer with these guys, with the thoughtful leaders, to be able to have that type of rapport with them. And they think it's about the beer, the relationship. It's not. You're not trying to convince them, to get them on board. You're just asking them to speak their truth, because in speaking their truth, they really are representing the organization and what the needs of the organization are, and the rest of the organization, which typically is 60 to 80% of the rest of the organization.
Correct. Bandwagoners, naysayers.
Yes.
It's so interesting as we're talking about specifically the thoughtful leader. I'm going back to the conversations that we've had about the visionary, the primary leader, and now we're talking about the thoughtful leader.
Yes.
Visionary, I feel some of that is, some people are like naturally visionary, but you can like build that. A primary leader is someone that really, what is the plan? How can we move this forward actually? My question is, between those three, like visionary, thoughtful leader, primary leader, are those learned, or do you naturally have them? How do you show up that between like those three?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to like how our own belief systems are formed, and that goes back to family of origin. What's our experience? Who are the mentors that have come into our lives? And then what are our natural strengths as leaders? Okay. So it's a culmination of all of that. That's how I would respond to that.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about all of what you just described, and here, this is a really succinct way that we use to describe thoughtful leaders, and I don't think it's in the book, but I'll talk about it anyway. Visionary leaders say things like, I want to go to the moon.
Yep.
They crave and are motivated by high purpose, and so they can see things further, faster, before.
Big picture.
Yes, they can see where they want to be, what should happen, what the future potentially could look like, very, very quickly. They're not in it for the job. That's really clear. When you run into a true visionary leader, it is not about the job. It is pure purpose of why they were placed on this earth.
Legacy.
Yes. And then the primary leaders are about, okay, if we're going to the moon, visionary leader, we're going to have the best rocket ship ever, and excellence. They're motivated by excellence. We're going to do this, and we're going to do it right. And so there's a lot of tension between that visionary and the primary leader at times, because in wanting to do it right and have things really in order, that requires somebody who's wired more to put structure in place and to have systems that help make that turn out in a very excellent way. And then the thoughtful leaders are the level of leaders that will say, well, we can build a great rocket ship, but just don't blow up my family in the process of launching this rocket ship to the moon. And so their value really is about safety, physical safety and psychological safety in organizations. And so you always can identify your thoughtful leaders by two questions. The first question, if you look around the table of your leadership team or of your department, you look around the room and you say, who's been here the longest and who really has loved the organization through thick and thin, through the good, the bad, the ugly, all of the things that organizations in their life cycles deal with. And once you've identified that those people, it might be Susie and Joe and Johnny, and you might have a half a dozen or so. The second question that you have to ask as a part B of that, and have had a constructive attitude throughout that tenure within the organization. And it's important to say constructive. I'm not talking about positivity. I'm talking about the ability to ask good questions and be constructive in forward progress for the organization. And that will identify a little smaller subset. So of those 6, you might get down to 4. Mm-hmm. And then the last question is the Mikey question. If they get behind an idea, has your job implementing that idea gotten that much easier? And if the answer is yes, you have just identified a thoughtful leader. Okay. They know where the bones are buried. They know the good, the bad, the legacy of that organization. They know the people around that table, and they can make things happen. And so that's how you identify those Mikeys around that table.
That's really good. Those 3 questions.
Yeah.
So as you're listening to this and as you're watching this, those are 3 really, if you're listening to the podcast, go ahead and rewind. Write those questions down to help identify who those people might be in your organization, because those are the people that they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be understood. They don't necessarily need things to go their way, but they want to know that if change is going to happen, that it's only going to be for the benefit of the organization, because we're going to the moon, but don't blow up my family. I like how you said that. That was really...
Let's keep us intact as a team.
Yeah, let's do this. Let's do some amazing things, and let's not blow up.
Yes.
Let's stay on the mission so we can keep doing the hard work.
Yeah.
That's really good. Thank you. I'm glad you went into those questions. I'm glad you did.
Can I give you 2 more things about thoughtful leaders?
Please.
They do require, from a leadership standpoint, that they have a couple of unspoken beliefs or rules that they follow.
Okay.
One is that you treat people fairly. So in the process sometimes of change in an organization, you'll meet resistance, and some of that resistance can come from naysayers, people who are who have a healthy level of needing chaos, and in addressing naysayers, they still are a part of the family. And so it's really important to thoughtful leaders that those naysayers are treated fairly, as you may be putting them in positions where they choose to exit the organization, that you've given them every chance to win. And that's why when we teach leadership, we really do talk about how important it is to have those relationships, that you really do give people the opportunity to win at every juncture as much as possible. And the other thing that they require is that you follow the procedures or the things that you've put into place. So you can't, again, let's say you're implementing a change process and it hasn't been clearly defined, the steps of what that looks like or what that is, and somebody's made a misstep. If you don't follow what you had laid out from a procedural perspective, they will go negative on you. And when thoughtful leaders go negative on you as a leader, you have just lost not just the influence of that one thoughtful leader, but you've lost influence of 12 to 18 other people in the organization. So keep that in mind when you're working with those thoughtful leaders. Be fair. Follow the procedures that you've set out in your organization to be successful, because they are watching. They love all of their family. They do see naysayer behavior, and they don't see that as healthy necessarily, but they still love that person, no matter what, and they want to see them treated fairly or in the procedures that are outlined by the organization. You can't shake and jive a thoughtful leader. Like, you can't shuck and jive them. Like, they see it all. And so you want to make sure that you're really leaning in, you're a high communicator, you're spending time with coffee, relational time with them. Don't call them out as thoughtful leaders. Those are just some little tips about working with thoughtful leaders.
Yeah. And some of them can probably bring some of the best ideas too.
Yes.
I imagine, because they're looking through a different frame.
Yes.
They might not be looking at the profit and loss statements. They might not.
Yes.
They're working with the other 50 employees. Like, they're in the field.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're the best people to get ideas from, or actually just, hey, give me a read on how things are going. That's probably the best person to maybe ask, would you say?
Yes. That's why the informal time with coffee or going to have the beer after work is so important, because you want to spend that relational time to get that pulse. They will give you such a good pulse.
Yeah, what's the current state?
Yes.
Like, what's really going on? Because
yes.
It's easy to show up and look good, but that's not necessarily, this isn't how things are. Like,
yeah. We always, it always comes up in our group processes about employee engagement surveys, and surveys like that are typically done without knowing who's filling out the surveys. And when people have an open letter like that, oftentimes, they'll take shots over the bow, or they'll say things that they wouldn't normally say to you face to face, where we actually can resolve an issue or a problem. And so we actually recommend that rather than paying high attention to those engagement scores, connect with your thoughtful leaders. Spend time with them. Get to know the pulse of what people are thinking, feeling, and experiencing in your organization. Because that's what matters. That's where the rubber hits the road, and you actually can get problems solved and decisions made and get people the information and the communications that they need.
And change can happen in a healthy way.
Yes.
Not be forced.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you,
It's
Tracy.
an art. It is an art.
It is. I almost want to dig a little bit deeper into it, just because there's so much impact with what a thoughtful leader has.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate that. So if you are watching this or listening to this, the information that we're sharing here is actually shared with you all in this book, Is Everyone on the Boat? By Dr. Fred Johnson and Dr. Paul Metler. So far, up to this point, we've covered 3 of the characters in the book: the visionary, the primary leader, and the thoughtful leader. There's a couple other characters that we might be chatting about in the future.
Yes.
But today we've been talking about thoughtful leader, and if you feel like you are one of those thoughtful leaders in the organization, hopefully this has brought a little bit of clarity to you. Or if you're running an organization and you need to start to identify some of those thoughtful leaders, our hope is that these questions have helped you to reflect a little bit on how you lead your team and make it more impactful. So if you've not yet picked up the book, Is Everyone on the Boat? Pick this up. Go on Amazon and pick it up. It's a book that talks about the characters, but it's written in a story format. So it's a real easy read. But how it's written is it's written so well because it talks about the thoughtful leader and how that can impact the whole organization. So thank you so much for joining us here today on the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast. We really appreciate you being part of our leadership community. And if you found value in today's episode, go ahead and share, family, friend, colleague. You never know what one small episode, one small podcast, any kind of information can impact another person that you know directly. So feel free to share this with someone else. If you are if you're a frequent listener and you love the show, we want to ask that you give us a rating and you give us a review. Your rating and your review will help us impact more people. And finally, every month, InitiativeOne hosts this leadership event. We call them think tanks. And we got another one coming up next month. And if you've not yet attended one of our think tanks, go to initiativeone.com/events to register for the next event. This is what the event is. It's a discussion, it's a topic, it's different things that we cover that organizations are either having great success in, or maybe there's challenges that are happening in organizations. These are things that we cover that you can take back with you in your organization. You can attend in person, or you can attend online, and we'd love for you to join us. So go ahead and go to initiativeone.com to register for that and join us on this leadership journey. We're impacting more and more people each and every month. And remember, leadership isn't what you do, it's who you are. Thanks.